Good day, I'm Lady Licampomanes and my topic is what is the budget of work or BAW? Okay, budget of work or BAW is a resource material for teaching multigrade classes that contains K-12 basic education, curriculum competencies, skills, and objectives. Topics for specific skills and competencies, and teaching strategies, activities, and a time allotment arranged into column for easy reference and notation. It will serve as teacher reference in preparing daily and weekly lesson plans. So, based on my opinion po, pagkakaintindi ko po sa budget plan is um, yung everyday na ginagawa ng mga teacher. Kumbaga parang daily gagawin nila. Kumbaga yung lesson plan po na ginagawa natin, ganun yung pagkakaintindi ko sa budget plan, budget of work or tinatawag nating BAW. Yun lang po. Thank you.
Meron na doon.
Hello po. BAW for Multigrade English for grade 1, 2, and 3. I am Lonlyn P. Alcobar, BEd 3C. Next slide po.
Wait lang po. Sorry.
This is budget of work from Multigrade Teaching English Competencies for grade 1, 2, and 3. As you can see, in week 1, day 1, the domain strand is listening comprehension, and the week 1, day 2 is oral language. It has a competencies, suggested learning activities, and suggested assessment activities per grade. Each week or day has allotted different objectives and activities to do. Next slide po. Why it is called budget of work? From the word itself, budget. Budgeting your plan for your lesson, it serves as teacher reference in preparing daily lesson or weekly lesson plan. Budgeting your time, you can manage the time allotted days and that objectives. By means of budgeting, you can now identify your learning objectives and plan the specific learning activities for your learners. Budget of work, which provides details on how most essential learning competencies, MELC, and enabling competencies should be divided and distributed there. Yan lang po. Thank you. Next na po.
Okay na po, may nakikita na po.
Okay na po.
Meron na?
Ano?
Okay. Good evening once again. I'm Nympha Abante together with Vivian Batelo, and we're going to tackle about the contents of BAW or the budget of work for multi-grade teaching English competencies for grades 1 to 3. So the pivot for a budget of work or BOW is in English is a resource material in teaching English that contains and highlights the most essential learning competencies or the MELCs. And the learning competencies serving as enabling competencies in achieving the former as mapped from the K to 12 basic education curriculum for grades 1 to 10. So we have here the alignment of the language and literacy domains with the five substandards domains, or what we call the language literacy, which are the listening, speaking, reading, writing, and viewing. So uh, we're in this domain-based learning competencies are the features from K to 12 curriculum in English curriculum. So the number of the domains is different in every grade. So uh, under the integrated language arts domains, we have the oral language, phonological awareness, book and print knowledge, alphabet knowledge, phonics, words and recognition, fluency, spelling, writing, composition, grammar awareness, and structure, and so on. So if we can see, um, uh, the integrated language arts, like the oral language, has the literacies like the listening and speaking. And with the phonological awareness, we have listening literacies. For book and print knowledge, we have reading literacies. And for alphabet knowledge, we have all of the literacies, so and so on po. So this illustrates a clearer view on the presence of language domains in various grades, levels, and key stages. So this source is from Depth Ed K to 12 Curriculum Guide for English. Okay, according to Richard and Rogers of 2001, as cited in Richard's 2006, that the identified domains in K to 12 English curriculum are anchored to the context of communicative language teaching, or the what we call CLT, which based on the theory that the primary function of language used in communication and its primary goal is for learners to develop competence. So we have four features here. First is the linguistic competence, which is the knowledge of the grammar and vocabulary. Second, socio-cultural competence, which is the ability to say the appropriate thing in a certain social situation. Third, discourse competence, which is the ability to start, enter, contribute to, and end a conversation, and the ability to do this in a consistent and coherent manner. Fourth and lastly, the strategic competence, which is the ability to communicate effectively and repair problem caused by communication breakdown. So these abilities requires appropriate knowledge, which will be helpful in understanding the target concept for the appropriate use of target language in various situations. So we have here the example of the actual budget of work for multi-grade teaching English competencies for grades 1 to 3, and this is going to tackle by Miss Vivian Batelo.
Good day, everyone. I am Vivian Batero, and then I will be continue the table of Rabaw. This table is about the budget of work for multi-grade teaching and English competences for grade 1, 2, and 3. So from the left side of the table, you will be see the time allotment. For grade 1, it is 0 minutes. Then grade 2, 30 minutes. And for grade 3, it is 50 minutes. It has a five parts. Then the first column is include the week, week and day. Then the second domain, at the second column is under the domain strand. Then the under of the domain strand is the listening comprehension. Then the next part is the 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 competencies of every grade level. For the grade 1, listen to short stories. Points. Number 1, note important details pertaining to A, character, B, setting, C. Event. The code area EN1LC-3A-J-1.1. For the competencies of grade 2, use an understanding of characters, incident, and setting to make prediction. The code is EN2LC-3A-2.4. And the second part, and the third part is the suggested learning activities. So every grade level, it has it have a different suggested learning activities. For the grade 1 and grade 2, we have here from a text heard children answer with WH question. It is applying the DRTA or directed reading thinking activity and listening mode. For the grade 1, sample question on noting details. The first one question is, who is the main character in the story? Second one, where did that story happen? A third one, what happened in the story? And for the grade 2, que- question during reading, what do you think will be happen in the next story? While post reading, the question is, were our guesses correct? And for the grade 3, suggested learning activities, with the aid of prompts, children retell the story. Then the last part, suggested assessment for grade 1, listening to a recorded story. It is answer the WH question on important details of the story. Then under the suggested assessment for activities for grade 2, a teacher must observe whether the children raise logical guesses as the story unfolds. And for the grade 3, role play a given incident of the story. So every day there is a budget of work. Then the budget of work was adjusted for only about 40 days to teach in per quarter. And it will be used for idea of a format of a lesson planning. And it also will serve as the teacher references in preparing lesson plan. So that's all. We will proceed to the next reporter. Thank you.
Paki-present na po.
Ikaw.
Ate, pa-present na po nung ako.
Ano ba't ayaw?
Okay po. Good day po. I'm Jonalyn Villar, PF Laxi po. My topic is, what is budget? Yes po. Parang same lang din po siya sa question na number 1, but ano lang daw po yung gamit niya. Budget of the resource materials using multiple classes that contain K-12 basic education curriculum, competencies and objective competencies, instant activities, and elaborate for easy reference information. I have some example po of budget of work based on the MELC for all subjects. Budget budget of work in Araling Panlipunan, budget of work in English, budget of work in ESP, budget of work in MAPE, budget of work in Filipino, and budget of work in Math. Budget of work in science and budget of work in kindergarten, budget of work for mother tongue, budget of work for ESP allied subject, budget of work for ESH core subject. This budget of work are issued in Region 4A enclosed in the guideline and implement of MELC pivot budget of work in all learning areas in school. And I have some step for to make budget of work. Number 1 step, examine your venue. Number 2, subtract and piece those. Number 3, determine variable expenses. Number 4, set aside a continuously fund for unexpected costs. And number 5, create your profit and loss statement. And number 6, outline your forward-looking business budget. Yun lang po.
So, good afternoon, everyone. The topic assigned to me is the 5 parts of the budget of work or the BAW. The next slide, please. The 5 parts of BAW are quarter column, the main column, the MELC column or the most essential learning competency, the learning competencies column, and lastly, the number of days taught column. Next slide, please. Yan. I have here an example of budget of work in grade 1 English. As you can see, on your left side is the quarter column. The first column that you see is the quarter column. Here in the Philippines, school days are divided into 4 quarters. As of now, we are in the fourth quarter. But in the example given, it is in the third quarter and in the fourth quarter. Starting to left, next is the domain column. Domain is the specified area of knowledge. In the example given, in the domain column, there is a letter there that stands for phonological awareness, the PA. And then the letter G stands for grammar awareness. LC stands for learning comprehension. OL stands for oral language, and stands for vocabulary development. The third column is the most essential learning competency or the MELC. In the example given, the most essential learning competency is numbered 1 in the column, in the fourth column, which is the learning competency. As you can see, there is one number in the second line, which is the learning competency, is to recognize rhyming words in nursery rhymes, poems, and the song heard. That's the most essential learning competency, the number one number there. And the last column is the number of days taught. Uh, the learning competency must be taught or mastered within 5 days. It was said there. So these are the 5 parts of the budget of work. Thank you for listening. I'm Donna Kalinisan.
Good afternoon, everyone. I'm Jessa Abante, and my topic is about the learning competencies. Next po. So, learning competencies are a group of knowledge, main ideas, or skills you expect student to master. Next po. So, I have here an example of learning competencies for grade 1 to 3. By looking closely at the learning competencies, did you notice a pattern in the arrangement of the competencies? How are the competencies grouped? So if we looked at the grade 1 competencies, we can see here the word listen. And for grade 2, we use it has a verb that is used. And for grade 3 is to recall. So we can see the differences by just looking at the verb that is used in each competencies. So for grade 1 students, the learning competencies that they needed to establish is to listen. It's just to listen because they are new to the area or to this area. Then if we moved on to the grade 2 level, we can notice that the grade 2 level, because they know how to listen to the story, for instance, they can use or understand some characters, incidents, and settings to make predictions. Then if we moved on to the grade 3, they know how to listen to the story, use appropriate or understanding in a story provided by the teachers. For grade 3, they just have to recall details from the text viewed or listened to. For teachers to design a good lesson, they must understand that competencies are the core of designing contents, activities, and assessment. The competencies represent the lifelong skills expected for every Filipino learner to master and become a way of life. When teachers understand the competencies, they will be able to utilize these competencies into smart and meaningful activities and appropriate assessment. So in learning competencies, we have to um, know that it has a level of learning and levels of assessment. Our MELC, or the most essential learning competencies, are guided by both levels of learning and levels of assessment, meaning the competencies are not standalone statements. It is guided by the scaffolding approach that runs from basic concepts to complex products. This only means that when we design our lessons and activities, we have to be guided by levels of learning, and when we design our assessment, we have to be guided by the levels of assessment. So, the overall summarize of my topic is that the learning competencies are designed to easy, average, difficult context based on the levels of understanding or the levels or the grade levels rather. Yun lang po.
So, good day, everyone. I'm the Merchant P. Sardania, and there are questions we must answer and know. Next slide, please. Are the suggested learning activities enough to develop the competencies? This is a question we must know if we can use the BOW or budget of work. For me, and as I found out in my research, the learning activities are enough to develop the competencies of the children. I read one by one the learning activities of grade 1 to 3, and the questions here will definitely help the growth and the development of children abilities. Next slide, please. If it helps children competencies, another thing we should know is, are they doable or applicable in the context of your learners? So we should know that because there are learners activities that are not suitable for students, so I studied carefully whether it fits the context of the learners. And I came to find out that learning activities can be done by the children and it is accordance with the grade of the children. Just next slide please. Just like the example here in week 1, day 1. For grade 1, their learning activities are who is the main character in the main story? Where did the story happen? What happened in the story? So, these learning activities in grade 1 are easy and basic questions that grade 1 can afford to answer. For the learning activities of grade 2 is, what do you think will happen next in the story? This question is a bit difficult compared to the question of grade 1 because they will be asked what they have not heard in the story. They will be asked what is the conclusion about the story. But this question is still doable in grade 2. So for grade 3, their learning activities are the most difficult of the three because the children have to retell the story. They will tell the whole story according to what they listened to and understood. But it is still doable for grade 3 pupils. So the learning activities of grade 1, 2, and 3 help in the development of children's competencies and are also doable in the context of learners. Okay, that's all, and I hope you learned something. Thank you.
So, hello. I will be the last reporter of this group. Hi everyone, I am Banteris T. Quinto, who will be answering question number 8. Are the suggested assessment... Oh, wala pa po palang PowerPoint. Sorry. Take two. Yan ulit po. Um, Hi everyone, I am Banteres Tikinto, who will be answering question number 8. Are the suggested assessment activities sufficient to evaluate the learning of pupils in the target competencies? But before that, I would like to define and give two common types of assessment in basic education, namely traditional assessment, and the second one is authentic assessment. So, assessment, according to Penton, 1996, is the collection of relevant information that may be relied on for making decisions. Now, there are two types of assessment. First, traditional assessments are tests taken with paper and pencil that are usually true or false, matching, or multiple choice. This type of this type was solely used in the past but is still used and combined with authentic assessment today. Authentic assessments, on one hand, is defined as tasks that students perform in order to demonstrate a skill or a competency and a rubric by which their performance on the task will be evaluated. This we are doing this interactive what we call this reporting is and others like demonstration, role playing, and etc. are examples of authentic assessment. They are real life scenarios and practical tasks that lead pupils to perform a new skill from what they have learned. However, although makikita natin yung mag-perform yung bata at makikita natin talaga na na-demonstrate niya yung skill or competency dun sa lesson, it does not mean na yung traditional assessment is no longer part of assessments today. Mas maganda nga lamang po na makita sa assessments ang involvement ng dalawa at hindi purely traditional assessment or authentic assessment lamang. Kapwa may ginagampanan ng mahalaga ang bawat isa sa pangangailangan halimbawa sa differentiated learning o iba't ibang paraan ng pagkatuto para sa bawat isang estudyante. So going back to the question, are the suggested assessment activities are are not enough or sufficient to evaluate the learning of pupils in the target competencies? So answering the question, I don't think that the assessment the suggested assessment activities are enough kasi there are depending on the needs and interests, learning styles of the pupils, geographical location, the teacher can modify the assessment activities as long as it was aligned to its competencies. So, as I've mentioned earlier, the assessment activities must include the traditional and authentic assessment to foster their concept and skills of the lesson. Ganon din po ayon sa nirerekomenda ng DepEd na dapat naroon ang contextualization at localization sa kabuuan ng lesson para makita nito yung kahalagahang dulot nito sa pang-araw-araw nilang buhay. Next po. Yung pinakang slides na, last slide na po. So, as you can see here, ito yung competencies niya sa left side for grades 1, 2, and 3. And these are the suggested assessment activities. These are just suggested, meaning you can, as I've said earlier, you can modify the assessment depending dun sa pangangailangan, dun sa learning style ng mga bata at uh, marami pa pong iba. So, yun lang po yung akin. Thank you.